Imagine going to the store and finding out you can't buy your favorite food. Or even if you could only get a tiny amount that has to last you a whole week, and you'd have to stand in a long line for it. That's what people went through during World War II, from 1939 to 1945. Even though it was frustrating and people complained, most Americans understood that rationing was an important part of supporting the war effort. Price controls were put in place to keep inflation down, while rationing aimed to distribute scarce goods fairly. OPA official E.W. Egan explained it simply on a 1943 radio show in Portland. If there was no rationing and the demand for coffee exceeded the supply, only the early birds would get coffee. Those who arrived later, like women working in defense plants or mothers with young children, wouldn't get any. Rationing ensured everyone had a fair chance to get essential items like coffee, towels, sheets, shoes, and dresses. Despite the scarcity of thousands of items during the war, only those critical to the war effort were rationed. Key goods like sugar, tires, gasoline, meat, coffee, butter, canned goods, and shoes were regulated. Fresh fruits and vegetables were not rationed, and much to the relief of many, whiskey and cigarettes also escaped regulation, though shortages did occur occasionally. Civilians first received ration books known as War Ration Book No. 1 or the Sugar Book on May 4, 1942. More than 100,000 school teachers, PTA groups, and other volunteers helped distribute these books. An American child purchasing a can of V8 and handing the grocer his ration book exemplifies how rationing was integrated into daily life. Sugar was the first consumer commodity rationed, with sales ending in April 27, 1942, and resuming on May 5th with a ration of half a pound a person per week, which was half of the normal consumption. Commercial users like bakeries and ice cream makers received about 70% of their usual usage. Coffee was rationed nationally on November 29, 1942 to 1 pound every 5 weeks, partly due to German attacks on Brazilian shipping routes. Other changes included the end of tin can dog food sales on March 1, 1942, and the requirement for people to turn in an empty toothpaste tube to purchase a new one by April 1, 1942. By June 1942, manufacturers stopped producing metal office furniture, radios, television sets, phonographs, refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, washing machines, and sewing machines for civilians. By the end of 1942, ration coupons were used for 9 additional items, including typewriters, gasoline, bicycles, shoes, rubber footwear, silk, nylon, fuel oil, and stoves. By November 1943, items like meat, lard, shortening, food oils, cheese, butter, margarine, processed foods, dried fruits, canned milk, firewood and coal, jams, jellies, and fruit butter were also rationed. Many retailers welcomed rationing to manage shortages caused by panic buying, such as the rush for flashlights and batteries after Pearl Harbor. Ration Book No. 5 was very rare, issued to only a few people. The events of December 7, 1941 thrust the United States into World War II, leading to significant changes on the home front, including the introduction of food rationing in 1942. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Emergency Price Control Act on January 30, 1942, enabling the Office of Price Administration, OPA, to establish food rationing, which began in the spring. Under the food rationing system, everyone, including men, women, and children, received their own ration books. Rationed foods require either red or blue points. Red points covered meat, fish, and dairy, with each person receiving 64 points per month. Blue points covered canned and bottled foods, with each person receiving 48 points per month. The OPA adjusted point values based on availability and demand. Sugar rationing started in 1942 and lasted until 1947. Other rationed foods included coffee, cheese, and various dried processed foods. The war placed additional demands on the agricultural sector to feed the home front, support U.S. troops, and fulfill obligations to allies through the Lend-Lease program. This led to significant expansion in the U.S. agricultural sector. The USDA encouraged the formation of the Women's Land Army, WLA, to address labor shortages, as many young men joined the military or other war industries. Inspired by a similar system in Britain, Eleanor Roosevelt lobbied for the program, which Congress approved in 1943. It is estimated that 2.5 million women worked in the WLA during World War II. The USDA encouraged people to grow their produce in family family and community gardens known as victory gardens. These gardens helped offset food rations, added vitamins to diets, and supported the war effort. Historians estimate that by 1943, up to 20 million victory gardens were cultivated. Although wartime propaganda often portrayed gardening as a masculine activity, women and children also contributed significantly. The extension services of the USDA played a crucial role in feeding families, troops, and allies during the war. Home demonstrators educated rural families on home economics, particularly food use and preservation. The USDA set up community canning centers, offering demonstrations and equipment for preserving food. These centers became vital during the war, with an estimated 4 billion cans and jars of food produced in 1943. By 1945, around 6,000 canning centers were operating throughout the United States. Scarce medicines like penicillin were rationed by triage officers in the U.S. military during World War II. Civilian hospitals received only small amounts, as penicillin was not mass-produced for civilian use until after the war. Triage panels at each hospital decided which patients would receive the limited supply of penicillin. Gasoline rationing was even more complicated and frustrating. Each driver got a windshield sticker with a letter from A to E indicating their priority. Cars used only for pleasure driving had an A sticker, which got you 3 to 5 gallons a week, depending on where you lived. Commuters had B stickers with the amount of gas based on their work distance. E stickers, reserved for essential professions like policemen and clergymen, allowed unlimited gas, but farmers, though granted as much gas as needed, faced a lot of paperwork. There was also specific systems for rationing car tires and tubes. Rationing wasn't perfect, and cheating was always a possibility. OPA officials knew they were relying on the goodwill of the public. They hoped everyone would use their ration stamps properly to keep the system fair. Violations included using loose stamps, lending ration books to friends, and other transgressions. People were supposed to destroy extra stamps, but this wasn't a popular idea. The black market flourished despite efforts to control it. Consumers and retailers found ways to bypass regulations, often paying higher prices or buying goods without coupons. Many customers flush with money from defense jobs were willing to break the law for a special cut of meat or a new pair of shoes. Retailers sometimes asked customers for unused ration stamps, which allowed them to buy more merchandise. Consumers were again advised to destroy any unused stamps. Warnings about black market activities were issued to 20% of American businesses, but nearly 7% charged with illegal activities. Few were prosecuted, and those who were often received small fines. The rationing program was so unpopular that many people turned a blind eye, much like they had during Prohibition. Hoarding became common, with people justifying it by saying they were stocking up before the hoarders get there. More serious violations occurred, often orchestrated by organized crime. Gas rationing, particularly unpopular, became a target for many schemes. The government reported that the gasoline black market often involved experienced criminal rings, even pulling in a worrying number of teenagers. Criminals produced counterfeit ration coupons, selling them to gas stations and drivers. The OPA estimated that fake coupons accounted for 5% of gasoline sales nationwide. Theft was also rampant. The OPA's Washington, D.C. office lost real coupons worth 20 million gallons of gas to theft, while in Cleveland, thieves stole coupons for 5 million gallons. Crime also infiltrated meat rationing. The red market involved selling low-grade meat at high-grade prices or selling meat with more fat or bone than allowed by federal regulations. This led to significant fraud and deceit within the food supply chain, further complicating the already challenging task of maintaining fair distribution during the war. The black market flourished despite efforts to control it. So, do you think we'll see something like this happen again? Would you be able to manage? Drop a comment below. But that's all for today. See ya!